Ladies and gentlemen, I'm having an interesting day. I came today from Berlin, from the capital, and I believe I've almost learned as much as you because this event is already super inspiring, although I've only taken peeks here and there. But I was following what was happening in those breakout sessions, and I'm sure you've learned a lot already. I'm trying to make my contribution also to bring this further and inspire you a little bit today. I want to start with a question before I introduce myself. Who here has read Plato's The Republic? Can you raise your hands? Wow, 2. Okay. That's why I'm going to explain to you the cave story. I was kind of expecting this. I don't expect everybody to read Plato. But there's this interesting story, the cave story. So it's a simplified story. Plato says this. There's a cave with a bunch of people in it. And those people are sitting with their back to the wall and with their back to the fire and they're facing the wall. And on the walls, they can see the shadows of what is happening in the cave. And they can hear everything a little bit, blurry because of the echo. They can't see properly. I mean, they see everything through shadows because, simplified, they've never really moved out of that position. They didn't dare. And then one day, one of them, really courageous, leaves the cave. He makes his way up to the outside, overcomes his fear, and before he can get to the real world, he's blinded by the light of the sun, because it's so bright in comparison to what he knew. But then after a while of struggling and really persisting, he gets into the open and he sees the real world. And he sees colors and clear images. He smells the outside, the nature. He can see the sun. He can see movements that are sharp, distinctive. And he realizes this is the real world. And he loves the real world so much that he decides he wants to introduce it also to his fellow peers in the cave. So he gets back down. And when he gets down there, they get frightened because they hear him talk about this world that they've never seen, that they are unsure whether that's even real. And what do they do out of fear? Who has an idea? What do they do? Yes, they kill him. He's too disruptive for their world. And over the years, over millennia, we've seen this happen over and over. There's another philosopher. My brain doesn't function right now. Socrates. Socrates was killed by the people of Athens because his ideas were too disruptive at the time. Now we celebrate him for his genius, right? Jesus Christ, whether you believe in him or not, simplified, he said that you can rule the world by love. People at his time didn't really cope with that, and they killed him. And even today, you have people that come up with really crazy ideas. Elon Musk. We don't kill people these days that much. What we do, though, is we talk a lot of stuff about them until the point where we harm them by just our words. Is that right? So there's 2 types of people when we look at it broadly. There's the people who try to preserve, and there's the people who try to disrupt. Now, disruption, there's different forms. This is our cave. This is one of the disruptors. I want to call him, he's a catalyst of change. You all know what's the function of a catalyst. And I like this image, especially in this context here. What we're trying to do, we're trying to be those catalysts. Spark ideas. Bring our teams forward. Bring them into the real world. Because the world has changed. Our ways haven't changed many contexts, but the world has changed around us. We're trying to clean this up and bring our organizations into the modern times. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I've always kind of had this rebel DNA. I've always been a disruptor. As a kid, I was always the obnoxious one, the loud one, the one that annoyed people. And it was like that all my life. And when I got to university, I studied business, I had to really keep it down. And then when I left university with a degree in business studies, I started going out into the real world. I was working in a traditional German industrial company. And I lasted for about 8 weeks until that came back. Because every day I would see things that I thought, whoa, this could be better, or this could be smoother, or this could be more democratic. And I didn't hold back. I shared all these beliefs, and the feedback was, so there's this one day I came into the office of my then boss, and I hadn't even opened the door properly when he was like, Alex, just let it go. This is too much for here. I've been working here for 40 years. I know what I'm talking about. Just let it go. And my heart, it sank because I was convinced that I could contribute with this mindset. I wasn't as conscious as today about, where to apply it and where not to apply it. But the essence was that I reoriented. And over the years, I worked in startups, in agencies. I founded my own businesses, and I failed some of them. And some succeeded. And all of these different steps taught me how beautiful some teams can be led and how difficult it gets and what we need to do to really get into high performance. And today we want to learn a lot about how to have agile teams. So we're moving into a world, I'm calling it the 5G world. Right now we're in the 4G world. You all know what 4G is, right? Yeah. Okay, 4G, right? You have everything you ever wanted in terms of information on your smartphone with you all the time. That's in the last decade, not the one we're in right now, the last decade, we shaped the internet to our needs. And in this decade, the 4G world, we put everything into our hands, accessible at any point in time, whenever we need it, wherever we need it. And we're moving into the 5G world. That's when our devices are speaking with each other and with us all at the same time. And we got to be ready for that. I wonder if we are. Our organizations need to be ready for that. Currently, it looks more like we're looking at that picture when it comes to maneuvering. And hand to heart, do you not struggle sometimes with all of the information coming at you? I feel like there's probably nobody in this room who can say, you know what, easy. Digitization, whatever, easy. I don't think a single person. But how do we transition? How do we get better? I believe that we're all good people. None of us deliberately is a bad boss or restricts people on purpose. But when pressure is on, when the world becomes too complex, too ambiguous, that's when we lose a bit of our values. That's when it's easier to put restrictions on people rather than let them go and try out things and be creative and passionate. So how do we get better? I want to propose 3 things. I want to propose that we start by knowing the world. And then I want to continue talking about knowing our team. And then third, knowing ourselves. And that's going to just intro us into a few things, a few approaches that I want to gift you today. So you can take them with you, combine it with all the amazing things you've learned, and have as kind of key takeaways to take back to your teams to improve everyday work and organization? Let's start with knowing the world. I want to ask you a question. I have 3 answers, and I want you all to participate and pick an answer, okay? Gonna make it super simple for you. This is the question, and there's answer A, B, and C. Okay, the question is, the majority of the world population lives in countries of A, low income, B, medium income, C, high income. Okay, so the majority of the world population lives in countries of, what do you think? A, everybody raise your hands who thinks A is correct, low income. That's probably more than 70% of you. Okay, thank you. Who believes the majority of the world population lives in B, countries of medium income? That's a good 10, 15% of you. Who believes that the majority of the world population lives in countries of C, high income? 1 person, 2 or 3 people. Okay, this is a question from the book Factfulness by Hans Rosling. He's a Scandinavian author, and he puts a mirror in front of us and shows us that we're not in touch with the world. Because we look at the world and we judge it by measures that were true 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. Not anymore. The world has moved on. The correct answer is B. The majority of the world population lives in countries of medium income. Now, your response is the same response people of all income levels, education levels, backgrounds give. And the interesting thing is that we have an update problem. In order to make accurate and great decisions in business and in personal life, we need to know the world, right? But we obviously don't, because all of the questions in this book point to the same direction. We've lost touch. We've got to keep updating. It's so easy for us to buy a new phone, to buy a new car, to buy new shoes, and update the hardware. But the software, what we need for the decision making, that's vital for the success of our organizations, that's so difficult. Let's move on. We got to know our team. Do we really know our team? I don't know. Do you want to help your colleagues improve their teams? Do you want to improve your own team? Well, the first step is to know it. I'll tell you something. Who knows of the game Fortnite? Yeah, that's a 20% of you. Okay, Fortnite, cool. It's a game that you can play on your phone, I think on the computer as well, I don't know. It's a very popular game. It's among the top 3 games played to date in the world, ever. And it only came out like 16 months ago or something. That's pretty impressive, huh? There's about between 80 million and 100 million people in the world are playing this game right now. That's way more than the population of this country. And my brother works in the gaming industry, so they have incredible amounts of data. What people do and when they play. And the interesting thing is, data doesn't lie. About 15 to 20% of people in your team are right now playing this game during work. Hurts, right? It hurts pretty bad. Ouch. And the truth is, like, data doesn't lie, right? But we have to ask ourselves, why? Why do they do that? They get paid to do some amazing work, and well, exactly. So we're incentivizing people with money where there's no passion. And when we ask why there's no passion, well, maybe they're not being trusted, or maybe they're not being seen even, right? Their leader doesn't see them. What about maybe they can't make decision autonomously? There's studies, psychologists know already that the highest dopamine levels get released in the brain when you see the fruits of your own work. Does that make sense? Yeah. But for that to happen, you will have to own the work. You will have to make the decision about what your challenge is. If somebody else makes that decision for you and says, please execute this, you won't have that effect. Make sense? Okay. We need to know ourselves. If we don't know ourselves, can we be good leaders? I don't know. Remember the stress? Remember the change of abilities to be a good leader from earlier? I feel like often, and this actually ties in with something I saw before, I took a note of this. We have a need to be leaders that inspire, right? That give people the chance to make decisions autonomously. But when we don't know ourselves, we might not be in touch with what's the right thing to do at what time. And you guys have amazing challenges that you set yourself for today to go into and work on. One of them, I think, the organizational constraints, number 4 in the workshops and the breakouts, that really inspired me. And I didn't follow it entirely, but the fact that you work on this presentation today is primarily on that, right? We're going to zoom out and not talk too much about, how you can form a swarm team. Because that's amazing, right? That you guys doing this is amazing. However, what I see in organizations as well is you form the swarm team, and the moment it's formed, you're also competing with local teams. And that's a challenge, that's a problem. I'd rather also give you an idea about how to transition leadership, right? How to bring people to a new culture, a new leadership culture. Let's tackle it right now. We see a complex world in front of us. You guys know this guy, right? Yeah, okay. That's Bruce Lee, okay. We see a complex world in front of us, many challenges, and what we do is, I can't cope with this. It's too much. Stress, right? Negative effects of stress, we all know about it. So what do? We say, keep it simple. Make the world incredibly simple so we can tackle the challenges. I think that's an illusion. The world is just becoming more and more and more and more complex. And we're just saying we can make it simple. And then tomorrow it's just a notch more complex than yesterday. I think this guy can teach us a lot. I think this guy, do you see this little smirk, this smile? He's embracing the opponent with this readiness. I would say he's so capable that he can tackle any opponent, right? So we need to become so capable that the complexity isn't an issue. And that's the agility everybody talks about. The interesting thing is, I always get asked, what's the difference between swarm and agile? Interesting question, right? Okay, so I want to quickly talk about the difference between an agile team, that's an agile team, by the way, an agile team and a swarm team. So this agile team here can change color. The tree is orange, it can be orange. Or let's say the challenge is entrepreneurial nature, then they can tackle that. But if it becomes more of a corporate challenge, then that team can also tackle that. That's an agile team, right? It can adapt to the challenges and find solutions, right? So the corporate, in this case, maybe is purple or blue, right? Make sense? Agile team. A swarm team is a team that is not in the capability of being both. It always is both. It doesn't change its outside. It is by default both. This fish is a fish, but it's also a bird. And it's a full-blown bird when it needs to be a bird, and it's a full fish when it needs to be a fish. That's a swarm team. That's a team so capable. What was that before? You were talking about, I think there was one session about how to be a swarm team or something like this. That's the answer, in my opinion, right? You are both. You're not changing. You are a shapeshifter because you have the capability of being both, okay? Good. 3 pillars that I want to give you to take home and hopefully remember that you can train your teams better, you can lead your teams better. The first one is culture, especially leadership culture. Letting go of that. If we want to be able to shape-shift, we can't have rigid leadership. We have to trust our team that they're so capable that they can make decisions for themselves. And maybe we just make the fraction so small that the risk is lower, but we let them. Make sense? And let me give you an example. So I want you to think about a culture code. Currently, in most corporate organizations, we have a system where in order to go up the rank in terms of leadership, you're taking some form of test, and then if you bring the performance, you can move up. Most of the time, across the board, this doesn't include people skills. If the performance fits, people are let through. And then you have people who have 0 people skills leading large teams. It's a disaster. And I wonder if you know this example. I'm pretty sure the majority of you knows this example. And that's something we have to stop. Instead, why don't we form a culture code where, for example, everybody knows what's positive culture and what's not wanted in the culture. And then, let's say, throughout the years, wherever some leader or some future leader has touch points inside the organization, those touch points can review that leader. And when that leader wants to move up a rank, the outcome of those touch point reviews will determine whether all the boxes are ticked against the culture code. And only if the people skills are also ticked, the boxes for the people skills, only then a person moves up. Otherwise, we have a system where there's very capable people who have very demotivated teams that play Fortnite all day. Okay. Local decision making. I want to propose that rather than reporting every single bit of work to somebody who isn't even in touch with the challenge at hand, we start letting people do. This ties in with what we said before. And primarily, this is a topic of passion, the passion to create. Hence the picture. The passion to create is the driver for innovation. People get demotivated when somebody who's not in touch with, let's say, the customer or the development of the product tells them something, and then they realize, because they're the experts, they realize how much nonsense that person says. But because of their seniority, they get to say it. We want to avoid this because we want to be the flying fish that can tackle any challenge, right? And maybe this ties in with something I saw before. In any case, what I want to propose as well is we need to learn failure. We need to learn a culture of failure. Have you ever heard the term, your last mistake is your best teacher? There's the story of the then chairman of IBM in 1943. He said something, I'm sure you've heard it all before. He said something like, I predict a need for about 5 computers in the world. And then nowadays, we hear this and we're like, what a stupid statement. And in fact, IBM was the very company that made the computer popular and big and commercial. And most people have already moved on, and they're already laughing about something else by the time that piece of information gets across. The point is, maybe there's a link between the two. Maybe because that gentleman made that mistake, IBM was capable of becoming the company that made computers popular and world famous. Making mistakes is not part of my culture. I'm German, by the way. You're from everywhere around the world. Wherever you're from, that's a fundamental thing we need to learn in order to be more agile, in order to be potent, high-performing teams. One more. The third one talked about culture, we talked about local decision making, and now I want to talk about this. What's this? It's a flower. We want to work on architecture, the architecture of our organization. Currently, a lot of organizations, especially the large ones, are formed in what we call a silo organization. We want to break that down and make ourselves more capable, right? In order for that to happen, we need to look at architecture. And we need to make that architecture so good that information can travel very fast. Two things how we can do this. This picture shows pollen that travels super fast, right? So we need to make communication very transparent. It can travel everywhere. Any information that can travel, that's allowed to travel within the organization, needs to be able to travel. Yes? And the second thing I want to give you so you have something to take home is we need to bring in the organization bridge building people. People in the form of bridges. In Estonia, they call them sild. That's people that are networkers, but also networkers of information. You know, it's surprising to me how in organizations, often there's people that work together, but they have no clue what the other person does. It's okay. That's part of our optimized economy. But you know how when people go to Japan and they talk to the local people, they get translators, right? Interpreters, like here. That's what we need in the organization so information can flow, right? So there's association. Imagine a bee. A bee takes pollen from one place to the other. That's a bridge. And by the way, in Estonian culture, many people look to Estonia as the European, innovators. That's part of their culture. I find that very interesting. I want to wrap up and then give you guys a chance to ask questions we can discuss. You know this car, right? Yes? I chose this car because we've just talked about 3 things, and this is maybe a way to remember an acronym of what we talked about today. So we talked about leadership culture, C, culture, change of culture. We talked about local decision making, that's the L. And we talked about architecture, that's the A. So if you think of the model CLA, then you have everything we talked about briefly today, and you might get some ideas back. And I just want to wrap up with the most important points for me today. First, be a catalyst. That's 1. Be a catalyst. We need more catalysts. If you're a catalyst, make other people catalysts. We need more of them for swarm teams. And then don't forget about the CLA. That's culture, that's local decision making, and that's architecture. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much for listening.